Thumbs up.
And our requirements are a little bit different.
Good evening and welcome to the Monday, January 22nd, Muscatine School District Board of Education work session. Madam Secretary, can you please take roll and help us determine the quorum, please?
Sure. Directors Connard,
Present.
Cooney,
Present.
DeBeat,
Present?
LaRue,
Present.
Phillips. Here. Schneider. Shore.
Present.
Thank you. Quorum is present.
Thank you. Can we stand, please, to recite the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag
The flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice.
Thank you. Would like to start by welcoming our visitors and media representatives here. It's good to see many people or several people standing here or sitting around and participating in our work session meeting. So with that, we move into our next item, which is the multi-tiered system of supports, MTSS, with Becky and Paige, please.
Hello, good evening. I'll use my clicker. Okay, so tonight, Becky and I are going to continue our conversation regarding student behavior and providing our multi-tiered system of supports. We're going to be responding to the feedback that you all gave on our behavior flowcharts, and we're going to review the district matrix for responding to unwanted student behavior. But first, we have invited a few guests. So our social emotional behavioral health lead teachers, some of them are here tonight to share a bit from their work with staff and students. So I'll invite them up. We have 4 of the 7 here tonight. So Katie Osbeeker is from Franklin Elementary. She's the
I can't hear anything.
Kim Finkeldye is the SIVA lead at Grant Elementary. Becky Easerhout is our SIVA lead at Mulberry Elementary, and Amy Justice is our SIVA lead at Susan Clark Junior High. So they are going to be sharing some of their experiences helping to provide multi-tiered systems that support students and staff. At this point, this graphic of our layered pyramid should look familiar. These are some of the roles and responsibilities of SIVA leads that they provide universally for all, and then some tier 2 and tier 3 supports as well. So they're gonna share their experiences and how they provide professional learning, how they can partner with teachers and other staff members, and also how they can help support our SSTs in providing better outcomes for kids. So I'll hand it over.
Will you say who you are again?
Yeah,
Thank you.
So I'm Amy Justice, the SIBA at Susan Clark Junior High, so thanks for having us. I am an active role on all the tiers within my building. I have been an active participant in the professional learning for our staff in our building. So on average, once a week in our building, we hold staff professional development, typically Thursday mornings. And our instructional coaches are amazing and provide a lot of information over the core practices for our teachers and instructors, but then they've also asked me to be an active participant in that by providing an SEL strategy, so just kind of a teaching strategy or building relationship strategies that I can reinforce with our teachers to build that relationship with the students. So one of them, I wanted to talk specifically about one of them that I've gone over, is restorative conversation. So as you can imagine, teaching can be, quite strenuous at times, and a lot of times our teachers at the middle school level, we have these students for 42 minutes, they go to the next period, and they go to the next period, and they go to the next period. So there's not a lot of time to have those authentic conversations, but we still want our teachers to. In one particular situation, a teacher was struggling with a particular student, did some interventions on her own, but it still wasn't working. So we have a system within our MTS system within our building where they can do an SST or a student success time referral form to our team. And then I looked at it and saw that they had an interaction with the student that wasn't the best. And I said, well, by golly, we've gone over restorative conversations in our professional development time. So I reached out to that teacher and I said, hey, can I help you collaborate and have a restorative conversation with this student? And the teacher was more than willing to, so I pulled out a script, and I just kind of highlighted with her, and I said, how about you say these parts, and I say these parts. And so it's that teacher relationship that I was able to have with the student. So we sat down as a group of 3, you know, that gave her ownership and taught her maybe how to have this restorative conversation with this child after there was a conflict, because we need to build that relationship back up so that instruction can happen. And so it was a really good conversation. The student was able to have some voice in there, and at the end, we had made a good plan about going forward, and that relationship is now restored. So that's one way that we help as SEBAs within our building.
I'm Becky Easerhout. I'm the SEBA lead at Mulberry. As I'm listening to Amy, it just made me think, like, I think all of us could share some stories similar to that on the rules that we do. I'm going to take a little different take. After being a teacher for decades in the district, in teaching PE, I wish that I would have had a resource like this when I was teaching, especially like in those realms. I have all the students at the middle school or the elementary, wherever I was, and if they had needs or behavior issues, lots of times I had to learn on my own, like, oh, like don't say this or don't do that with that kiddo. And there wasn't really that connection or that tie that could help me help that student better. And so that's one of the things that I really strive to provide, is if a student has an intervention or some things that are going on in the classroom that are working, how do we transfer that and modify it to an art class or the gym, and how do they hear the same terminology, and so all the teachers are on the same page with the kiddo, and that really that helps a lot. The other story, the most exciting one I wanted to share with you, is I've been doing this since it started. So this is my 3rd year as a SEBA lead, and when I started, I had this particular kiddo in 2nd grade. And he was a little stinker. He had the bad boy label. I was, in fact, told, like, his brothers were bad. Like, he's just a really difficult kid. I don't know if you're going to I don't know what we're going to do. And he's a distraction to himself and to others. And I'm like, okay, yep, this is good. We can do this. So I got to know the parents, got to know the teachers, and we tried different things and tried different interventions, kept the data, saw that little by little things were starting to work. Well, then the school years go so fast, 3rd grade rolls around, and teachers talk to each other, you know, like, you're going to get this kiddo from year to year. But I could go to the 3rd grade teacher and say, hey, I work with the parents. This is what we did in 2nd grade. It's working. Here's the data. It's starting to work. How will it look in your classroom? How can we work and make it work for you? And so the teacher and I sat down, worked out a similar plan, similar system, worked through 3rd grade. And this kiddo didn't have a lot of friends in 2nd grade. And he was like, you know, nobody really wanted to be his friend. In 3rd grade, it's starting to change. 4th grade, same kind of thing. And I'm in contact with the parents. I'm always a commonality from grade to grade for the student and his parents, like introducing them to the teachers. So by 4th grade, the data shows we're doing really good. He has friends. He doesn't really have that label anymore. We've been able to take the intervention that we started with that was pretty heavy and backed it off so it's more self-monitoring. So he has tools in his toolbox that he can take on and hopefully keep working on. And so that he'll just keep getting better and better and being able to be more successful in school. So I think that's one of my passionate parts about this job, is just being able to make the connections and help in all of those different ways that sometimes just kind of slip through the cracks. Thanks for letting us talk. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Kim Finkeldye. I am a CBA at Grand, and I'm actually new to the Muscatine School District, but I'm not new to teaching. I've been teaching for 15 years and have just come from Davenport. And I'm really excited because I think that's something that sets Muscatine apart is their recognition that we do need to treat behavior as we do academics, and that we realize that teachers need support in the classroom with behaviors just as they would academics. And so I really enjoy kind of that MTSS perspective on not just reading and math and things like that, but behavior is also. A story I wanted to share with you is a little boy who came the beginning of the year in kindergarten, was really displaying some pretty dangerous behaviors, very unsafe for himself and for some other people around the building. And I was able to sit down with the classroom teacher and we developed some tier 1 interventions, and when that didn't work, we kind of looked at our data and came up with some tier 2 interventions. And then when that didn't work, we were able to bring in the challenging behavior team and get some additional supports in. And so from September to October, he had about 12 behavior referrals. And then since we implemented some pretty significant interventions for those behaviors since October, he has had 0 referrals and is being very successful in the classroom. And that was all through our data collection, our collaboration with our challenging behavior team, our collaboration with the classroom teacher, and other supports around the building. And I just love being in Muscatine, and thanks for this opportunity.
Hi, I'm Katie Osbaker. I am the CBA at Franklin. This is my second year in the district, 7th year teaching. I come from the high school world. The past 2 years I've been working in the elementary world. Obviously a culture shock, but it's nice. I have 2 young kids, so kind of an easier transition for me. I'm just going to talk about what I kind of do day to day. So my favorite part of the day happens right at 7:45. I have the opportunity to lead. I say lead, but the students would say I'm not the leader. Breakfast Club. So we have 5 students who had a hard time transitioning into their academics. 7:45 is an early start for 9-year-olds. So they get to come down to my office after checking in with their teachers, signing up for lunch and for breakfast, and they come down and we play games. In this game, you have to have a role, so there's always a timekeeper, there's a note taker, you have to eat your breakfast first, and we're working on social skills, unbeknownst to them. So they are working on raising their hand, not blurting, executive functioning skills, taking turns, how to be a leader, when to be a follower, and just a lot of keep your hands to yourself at this point. So that's my favorite part of the day is we get to work on these skills. Last week we had our student success team there at Franklin, and I had the honor of getting the compliment that this is helping. There's 4 4th graders and 1 3rd grader, and they've seen an immense growth in their behavior in the morning and an easier transition into their academics. So it's obviously great to hear. And with this 4th grade class, it's been known to be a very tough 4th grade class. There's 2 classrooms at Franklin, and all 4 4th grade students in my group are from 1 class. 2 of those have had behavior support team referrals and have had 2 COAs conducted at Franklin. And so those results showed us that they need to continue to be part of our breakfast club, and they are now part of the tier 1 support in their classroom. It's called the praise game. So their entire class is learning how to give behavior specific praise to their peers. It's also awesome. Just yesterday we had the compliment from support staff who monitor that hallway because we have some bathroom issues, how awesome it is to see 4th grade just shine and that they're doing so much better. And mind you, we call them the COVID kindergartners because these 4th graders just struggled immensely. And now with this tier 1 praise game, we're seeing this huge rise in appropriate behavior. So just really good to see, and it's fun to see the efforts that the students are giving. So thank you.
So now Becky and I will be responding to your feedback for our behavior flow chart.
All right, thank you. So to continue the conversation, we appreciate your feedback from the note catcher. There were definitely some common themes amongst all of your responses. Those common themes are up here on the screens. It was common in all the responses that we need to look at our consistency. Whatever process that we're using, it needs to be more consistent. There is definitely a lack of clarity, so that is something that we need to revisit and work on our clarity. Logistics, and what I mean by logistics, how are behaviors, predominantly majors, how are they being managed? From the point to when it happens, you know, how do we go from point A to point B to point C and then follow up with? So just that whole cycle on how is it managed? How does the behavior get logged into the system? What is the response from the teacher, from the administrator back to the teacher or any other parties that were involved in the incident? So I just kind of lumped that all together and calling it logistics. And then also communication to stakeholders. That is, includes all of you as the board, but it includes all stakeholders, our teachers, our staff, our parents, our community. So we lump that together all into one. So these conversations, amongst other, we will be taking back to our administrative team. On Thursday, we had a chunk of time with all administrators to start, well, actually not to start, but to continue this ongoing work. So every time we get together as either an administrative team group or a principal group, meaning elementary or secondary, we are coming back and revisiting all of these things. So just a little snippet into kind of our next steps. And I know that this isn't maybe eligible or legible to read, but what we're working on, we have created a document and we are constantly refining this. Again, when we met the other day for 2 hours, we are constantly coming back. There is a lot of information that goes into this. It sounds super easy. It's not super easy. It's hard work. And we know that we need a system that promotes consistency, equitable, and progressive in levels of discipline. So, for example, this document has been created. It defines the purposes and the documentation requirements. It outlines the level 1, that's a minor, the definition, examples of what it is, and then on the other side, how is it handled procedure-wise. We have another document that we are continually vetting too. This is a big chunk of our time. Again, looks easy, sounds easy. Why can't we just have this thing now? There are a lot of moving pieces. For example, we have what's called an Iowa descriptor. These are by the state that they tell us what these descriptors are. For example, arson, weapon, physical aggression with injury, physical aggression without an injury. The list just goes on and on. So currently, the state descriptors that we have 26 of them. Then after the state descriptor, we need to define what that is. For example, on the far left, we have abusive or inappropriate language. Within abusive and inappropriate language, there are 3 behavior incident definitions, and we have to go through the definition. We have to have common knowledge of what it is, so all administrators understand when this happens and it's considered a minor, this is what we're talking about. Then we have the incident level. How is it going to be handled? Is it classified as a minor, a major, or serious? And then we have to look at what are the options in responding, what's required. For example, if this happens, inappropriate language, non-directional swearing. Well, what does that mean? We have the definition, and then we have what's going to happen. The teacher contacts the legal guardian. The teacher conferences with the student. Then we have some things that may also happen depending on what that incident is. It may result in a loss of a privilege. It may result in a behavior contract. That's at the minor level. Then we go to the next level. Again, we have to come up with levels that are progressive. When something like this as a major happens, we define it, we give examples, and then we go, if this happens, principal contacts legal guardian, conference with the student. Then there's a list of other things that may happen as a result of whatever happened, and then the administrator follows up with all relevant personnel in order to ensure effective communication. That might just be one person. That might just be the administrator getting back to the teacher. Sometimes incidents involve other people besides the classroom teacher. There's other staffing involved, and it's the administrator's responsibility for follow-up. So what we are doing, we are taking all the event types, There are 56 of them, and we're going through as an administrative team to understand when this happens, this is a minor, this is a major, this is serious, and then what steps is an administrator going to take. So this is ongoing work. It's hard work. It's emotional work. When you have things like this, there always seems to be outliers. Well, what if this happened, but this didn't happen? And so we as an administrative team, we have to talk through that. Behavior is tricky. Discipline is tricky, and we have to make sure that we're consistent amongst all buildings. So if this happens at one building, this is happening at all of the buildings, how we react and how we respond. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of this document. Now, we have been working on this behind the scenes as an administrative team. Currently, our principals have this documentation, and we're kind of piloting it, so to speak. So this is being used currently with administrators, and then we follow back what's working, what's not. Hey, we need to take a look at, for example, vaping. Right now, we have that in major. These are the consequences. Our data says that this isn't working. Let's talk about vaping with the consequences and things like that. So that's just an example of things that we're internally really looking at, talking with as a team. It takes time. We feel that we've made, I would say, pretty good gains on principals coming together. We're all coming together and we're talking about this. We're holding each other accountable, but it's also from a system, how we're responding in nature. So it's ongoing work. We will take the feedback from the note catcher back to them when we meet. Again, every time we meet, we're chunking time to talk about behavior, consequences, the plan. The plan is that this would be part of our student handbook. And as you all know, that is something that the board approves, the student handbook. We also know that this document needs to be shared with all stakeholders, and we want to do that. Right now, we have draft on it because we're having the principals go back and use this and make sure that we've worked out all the kinks thus far. We know sometimes with behaviors, sometimes things happen that didn't make the flow chart, and we have to talk about it, and those things are always going to happen. But at least we're creating guidelines for everything that we can at least think of that's currently happening, and then how are we responding? And then it holds everyone accountable. That's a lot of information. I'm going to pause there and just ask if there's any questions.
And I'll follow up too, and
Yes.
just, this is a priority for us, and that's why we're dedicating time each month in our meetings. As you'll recall, with the change in legislation, we were given, in the fall, guidance from the state, which really, there wasn't a lot of guidance in there. There was a lot of definition yet to be done. So that's where some of this has continued to grow, is defining. So initially, the state said, you're going to have level 1, 2, and 3. They didn't say how to define level 1, 2, and 3, just that you had to have it in there. So we've had to go through that, kind of build that out. Again, as this document is built out, it's that process of going through, are there areas that we're missing? And so how do we make sure that if there's something we're going to require of everyone, you can see what that is within the document. You're going to do these things. Some of it's based on the legislation. Some of it's based on because this is what we should do, right? And then there's pieces, even in our last meeting last week, there were pieces about, well, we need to be more clear in here that there will be kind of increasing consequences for repeated behavior, right? Let's make sure that's real clear throughout this document. There were also pieces in there that we talked about. Let's make sure in the document when we talk about what the action steps are for the administrator, where's the piece that's follow-up to the staff member, right? We know that's an area that isn't always getting addressed, so how do we ensure through this document that that's in there? It's reminding our administrative staff, hey, let's go back, follow up with this teacher and with the staff involved in the incident. So that's kind of the process that it's been going through. We know we need to get this out to staff. Again, trying to make sure that our admin team is comfortable with it, and we've made the adjustments necessary to do that.
Question that I have has to do with, you said that you talk with the administrators, but is that in real time or is that only at a meeting? In other words, like an incident happens and that's documented. And then, so does the other administrators know so that they know that what they're comparing to? You know what I'm saying? Because
I
otherwise.
think
it
where
was time
that's
and-
where some of those scenarios come out in those conversations. Obviously, in real time, we're not necessarily able to connect with all administrators on that, but those are opportunities for us as we deal with these different things where we can bring back for that whole group to have conversation around. Or if there's something missing. But that's, the other piece in using this, that as we talked with administrators, if you find there are areas that aren't working well, give us a call. We're not going to, we need to be using this document. There may be some, areas to improve on here, but keep using it. Let us know what those are. We'll help you through that, and then we can make adjustments to it.
What is your first box up there? So mine looks different, I think, and I can't read that.
So we have the Iowa description, so this is the state indicator. Then we have an event type, so it's the definition of what it is. And then we have the behavior incident definition, the level, and then the range of responses. So this is just what we did. We just did a screenshot of part of it. So this is what that looks like. So it gives the definition of what it is, because when we go into Power School, this is a behavior log entry, and so when you go into Power School there and add a behavior log, you get this list, this drop-down list. So the incident, this falls in abusive, inappropriate, and then the principal has to determine the incident. We don't have Power School on here, but that's how it's coded. So I'm unsure of what.
I might have just pulled up
I think
the wrong
that slide is
page.
slightly different than, so you have a
Yeah.
box up on top of that. So this is our presentation
Yeah.
slideshow. So it's probably updated from the PDF. So
Okay.
when we're done, we'll update that and put
Okay,
it in there.
I'm just like,
Because
what
that-
am I looking at? Okay.
That
I mean,
top
it's
piece
all,
about physical aggression with injury is not in.
Oh, I see.
okay, yeah.
So the below piece, the responsive considerations, the abusive or inappropriate language, that's in there, just not that upper piece. So we'll make sure we get that too.
Because there's 26
Yeah.
of them, and then some of them have multiples. So the physical, the inappropriate, that has 3. So we have it's a very long document.
Yeah.
Obviously, and when we get closer to sharing it, which I feel we're very, very close, you'll be able to see the whole thing. From our purpose and definition to, we have a glossary. This is what we were calling the guidance tab, and then we have a suspension tab. So we're working through all of that.
Yes. And I believe I've read through quite a few of them already on what we've been provided with the note catcher and stuff like that. So, of course, you have all of our feedback as well. But I guess I heard about like a challenging behavior team when your CBAs were talking, and so I'm curious what that looks like in every building. So that might be a question for a different time, and how those referrals are made. But then, in response to this too, like we keep talking about it like it's new. And I know that you guys have spent a ton of time fine-tuning it, defining these things, but we saw this chart 2 years ago as well. So we've had behaviors listed out and responses and things like that. I think one of our buildings did a really great behavior plan actually, where they had all of these things listed out. They provided it with families for clear expectations. And like we kind of half got on board as a district, but it wasn't made available to everyone. So we've continued to do those things different. But the piece that I keep hearing, because I hear about administrators, I hear about your teams, but I keep missing that piece where we go into a teacher's classroom and we say, tell me about 5 behaviors that you struggled with today and what were the responses? What did you do to rectify that? And then what did it look like when you needed help, if you needed help? And what kind of work are we doing in the classroom so that we can see what this is? I understand we have to do all of these things, but in the meantime, what are we doing for what's happening in the classrooms right now?
So we have people like our CBA leads. That is a position that is helpful to all classroom teachers. So that is just one. And actually, since they're here, you had a question. Well, your first question was challenging behavior. If we can talk about that now, just because we have the experts in the room, I think it's a great time to talk about it since it is a question that you have. So can you revoice what your question was on the
Yeah, so I haven't heard a lot about that. I don't know what the process looks like across all of the different buildings. So I'm curious from like a higher level, what is the expectation of that team? Who is it made up of? How often do they meet? Those kinds of things. And then I'm assuming the SEBA is probably part of that team. And so how does that look as well?
Totally. So when we were here on January 9th, we talked about the behavior support team. And I know one of our leads used challenging behavior team, which was what our team was called before. So they are one and the same. Our district behavior support team is also our challenging behavior team, though we like our new name better. So the way that we go about referral, every building in our district has at least one district behavior support team representative. One is the SEBA lead in all of the 7 buildings that have a SEBA lead, plus an additional staff member. So sometimes that's a special education teacher, sometimes it's a general education teacher, sometimes it's a school counselor who has received training through our district on those behavioral principles. So a lot of training goes into that. The referral process comes through SST. So because we have those team members at the building level who sit on the student success team, they can help kind of funnel those students into our referral system. So what happens is they're referred, there's a certain set of criteria, the SEBA lead behind the scenes is kind of checking the boxes for the assessments and data that needs to be collected in advance. By the time it is submitted through the form, it comes to me as the district coordinator. We set up additional assessments, hold site visits and referrals, and then we follow up with a draft plan that is implemented and has kind of a longer term implementation and then follow up based on student performance.
And how does a teacher get the referral to the SSS team to then make the referrals?
Absolutely, yeah, and we talked a little bit about this last time too with our Tier 2 intervention. So the process is, if a teacher is struggling with the student's behavior, they can refer directly to the SEBA lead at their building. So what we found is that unlike with academics, where teachers have a really firm grasp on what are Tier 2 academic interventions, behavior is a little bit more tricky. Like, we're not all behavior experts when we come out of our teacher ed programs. So our SEBA leads can help put into place some Tier 2 interventions in advance of an SST referral. If the student is getting those Tier 2 interventions and they're still struggling behaviorally, then the student would go to SST and then we can follow the regular process.
What is the expected timeline if a teacher makes that referral to the SEBA, they work with it,
Yeah.
where Tier 1's not working? So let's say that we're to Tier 2 and we're continuing to have those referrals. At what point, or what is the timeline to be expected?
Well, the nice thing about having them at the building level is they should be responding as soon as possible, and that is a pretty quick turnaround time. What we have found is that it's really dependent on the MTSS framework that's in place in the buildings already. So if we have like a truly proactive and preventative Tier 1, then that works really smoothly. What we run into sometimes is if we are in an overwhelmed system where people are just responding to behavior, then we don't have that preventative piece in place, and then it starts to crumble.
I have just, well, obviously several questions, but I just feel like this is a lot of expectations on the gen ed teacher for talking to the parents, talking to the kids, redirecting, doing all of those things. And as you said, they're not behavior experts, although I will also say that I've had many teachers say it's hard for them to take advice from SEBAs. Nothing against SEBAs, I am not, and you two are experienced teachers, so that's a little different situation, but taking, advice from people that have never taught in a classroom. Yeah, it looks great on paper, and yeah, this should all work, but you're not here on a day-to-day basis. And I'm just gonna be honest, I've also heard from many teachers from many different buildings that the SEBAs and counselors are in meetings all the time and not really out there with the kids in the classrooms seeing what's going on. I guess my opinion of a SEBA, and everybody here probably knows my past experience, I kind of worked with at-risk. I did work with at-risk and behavior kids. I was on the district challenging behavior team. And I get that you come back with all of this in writing, but it's the day-to-day, get it done. that I think our district really needs to focus on. We've redone, like she said, we've redone these forms. I mean, we were doing these forms 10 years ago, describing behaviors, what's a minor, what's a major, and there's always going to be a gray area, always. I mean, you say you want to cover it. There's no possible way you can cover everything that's going to happen in a classroom or a hallway or a recess, whatever. I think we need to, I really don't know what I think we need to do, but I think we need to have some more clarity, which you've said, but it's still not coming out. We're in January, and nothing has changed, from the beginning of the year. Teachers are extremely frustrated. I mean, I went over teacher, parent, and student on this DDE thing. Behavior is the number one thing across the board. I think we need to show our community, our teachers, that we are in there doing something now. I'm not saying the work you're doing is not important by any means whatsoever, but until we get some of these little behaviors that turn into big behaviors nipped and gives teachers some support, I think we're headed, we're just not, we're not getting out of the hole that we've gotten into. And I'm not saying our district's the only district, but I feel like, I mean, I was frustrated when I left, and the state descriptors, all the stuff you have to do is very important, but we need those, and I'm glad to see, I know at first I believe SEBAs couldn't even work with kids. I'm glad to see that has changed at least. That doesn't make any sense to have SEBAs that can't work with kids. So I think we're headed in the right direction there, but I guess I would like to see, I don't know what kind of meetings SEBAs and counselors and ICs as well are in all day, every day, but I've been in some buildings and I have seen them in meetings all day, every day, or the days I've been there, not every day, of course, but I just would like to see SEBAs in the classrooms and helping, being actual help for these teachers that need the help. They can do the pull-out and talk to these kids. They can do some of the referrals, some of the parent contact. I'd also like to see some more parent accountability. I know in our preschool, we have kids coming in using profanity. That should not, something needs to be done about the little things. And I don't want you to think that I'm an expert. We need to have some consistency across the district on this stuff. And this is all great, but are we really doing consistent actions, I guess? I don't know what the word I want to use is, but I see the frustration level of kids, parents, and teachers increasing instead of decreasing, and that's very frustrating to me. And I'm not saying it's an easy job. It's a hard job, I know that, but another thing I think we need more of is parent accountability. Parents, what if the teacher can't get a hold of a parent? How many times is a teacher supposed to try to call a parent? When the parent doesn't answer, the parent doesn't come in. There's got to be, I think we got to draw a hard line and say, at some point, you are accountable for your child. A 3-year-old swearing in school is not the school's fault. I mean, they came to school so we need some parent education and some parent accountability. Of course, not all parents, when I speak, I'm not speaking of everyone. There's all different circumstances, but I just feel like the frustration level has not improved at all, and that's frustrating to me. So I don't know if I got that off my chest or if it made any sense, but I just think we really need to, the restorative conversations are great, the relationship building is great, but if you can't keep people out of the same building for more than a year or in the same position for more than a year or two, then that relationship doesn't continue on with the students. So I just think, I'll stop there.
Along with what Kim is talking about there, when you talk about that relationship between the teachers and your staff that way, is there any building mechanism so that you can make sure that you feel like there is those connections? Because basically, I think what Kim is saying is the connection just doesn't seem to be there to want possibly them to take instruction from the CBs?
No, they're not. I don't think that's it. It's just there's all kinds of instruction on, and I'm speaking from the elementary perspective the most, but there's instruction on so many, many, many things that one teacher is expected to do in a day, and it really, in my opinion, is not feasible. And we've hired SEBAs, and we have counselors in every building now, and I honestly, and I have good friends that are in all these positions, I just think some need to step it up a little bit and be more in contact with kids. I feel like we're getting more administrative heavy and we're taking good teachers out of the classroom to be SEBAs and ICs in these positions. They're not having time with kids, and kids are the ones that need the good teachers and the good relationship builders. We've got to get more skin in the game, more adults with hands-on with the kids, instead of, these forms are great, and again, I know that it's from the state, but less time maybe, not less time making them because they have to be done, I understand that, but maybe prioritize the actual children a little bit more. And I also, the SST, I've asked at the last 2 board meetings, and is there an SST form that's across the district? You said there was, the format was the same,
We have SST forms, correct. So our elementary principals got together, all buildings have forms, we looked at all the forms that they have. They are common in all of them. Some buildings might throw in something that's pertinent to their building, so they add that to the form. But there are forms we are working on as kind of a request from the board, I feel that in listening to these conversations that we've been talking about is having a common form. All of their forms look alike, but one might have something extra or different in it. So coming together, here's the common form that's required, and then if your building would like to add something, you can, but the form itself, they are pretty consistent. Some might have a form for tier 2 and some a tier 3, but it's still a form. So there is commonalities. Do we have one that they all use consistent? They will shortly, if that answers your question.
Okay, and what about, where is the parent accountability piece to this? I mean, they're notified, but do they, if it's the 5th time they've been notified for a minor in a month, is there any accountability that they have to come in and meet before their child?
Right.
I just feel like we're...
And I think too, Kim, we have some unique situations, and it's a community thing. We have some unique situations, so I think sometimes we have to utilize other resources. So we have a resource navigator. So it might be, our SRO and our resource navigator, along with the principal, a counselor, these people that we need, our attendance liaison. It's getting a team together and supporting the family, making that connection first. So some of these cases, it's not just the general ed teacher, the principal, a mom, a dad, and a child. There's more to it. And so we do lean on our resource navigators and our other outside supports too. We have many of our outside resources coming into our buildings for therapies, LSI, family resources. We have a lot of outside agency. So I think it's trying to connect services with what is the need and getting to that root cause. And it's hard.
And I've served on hundreds of those meetings. I've been in 100 of those meetings, and I get that, and they're very good. And I think wrapping as many people as we can around each situation is a great thing. But I also think we have teachers on a daily basis that there's 1 or 2 kids, and not even always the same kid, that are disrupting the education of the majority of the kids in the classroom. And I don't know what the answer is, again, but I feel like we need to put more resources. If it's paras, more paras. If it's more adults in the classroom, that's what we need. We've got to address this because it's...
I would say a couple years ago, we've really focused on that morning meeting at the elementary level. And what is a morning meeting? A morning meeting is when we all get together as a classroom and go over common expectations. As you know, having common expectations, we need consistency there amongst all of our buildings. A morning meeting is a connection piece. That's what it is all about, is building relationships, having that homeroom, that class act as a family and the teacher as a part of that. And so I know that we have really emphasized morning meeting. In fact, it's mandatory, it's required, it's in our building minutes that it happens each day. Connecting with the kids, we have a connector, but that's just a component that is universal in all classrooms at our elementary, is that morning meeting, which, like Kim, to your message, how do we develop that relationship and get it deeper than just a high five at the door, glad you're here, and start. So the more piece, we're also at the elementary working on, student engagement. How come our kids don't want to come? Why aren't they coming? And so that's another piece. And, we have a K-12 literacy implementation. We've changed some things in how we're teaching reading, and we're getting great results with that. Kids are motivated, they're excited to come. Is that indirectly, does that affect behavior? It actually does. If our students are engaged and they feel like school is fun, they like the content, then we see a decrease in behaviors. It's not gonna help all the things, but I feel as a district, we've really tried to put some resources and some time into those things. Can it be better? Yes. Do we have work to do? Absolutely.
Is there any way to get the child-adult ratio up instead of meetings, maybe hands-on?
Tell me more a little bit.
Well, like the CBAs and the ICs that are required to go to meetings. Some aren't, apparently, I don't know. I know some, I've heard from many different buildings that the CBAs and ICs and counselors are in meetings most of the day or a lot of the time. They're called, they're not called, they don't come right away to help. What is the priority of a CBA and an IC's job, I guess? And I think it depends on every building, obviously.
I don't have information in front of me that tells you exactly how many times they're pulled out. CBAs, we have 5 days, well, you can.
Sure. Yeah. I would say, like, in listening to your feedback, one thing I like to say, whether it's in regard to like an individual plan or like this district level plan, is a plan is only as good as the implementation of the plan, right? So we have a plan for our CBA leads, and in the buildings where that plan is being followed, we are seeing improved outcomes. And I think it comes down to, like you said, consistency from building to building. And that's what we're working on, right? That's the gap that we need to address.
Does every building have a skills room, or I know they're called probably 7 different things, but is that something that's consistent across the district? Is that something that could be looked into and perhaps become consistent with some training and expectations for those rooms?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of, at this point, like our preventative measures versus our reactionary measures, and we need to get both right. So yeah, definitely an important consideration.
Is that on the table then? Is that something that you're looking at?
I'm gonna let you talk and then I
It's
call
okay.
next.
No, it's okay.
There hasn't been a request for that.
No, what, and we should, as a matter of fact, in order to improve their process. So thank you for all the questions. But also, I don't want to miss saying thank you to Katie, Kim, Becky, and Amy for sharing I would say, magical stories with us. For me, as someone who's in education, I know when we turn around the life of a student, it's not easy. It's a challenge, but it's very rewarding for all of us when we do that. So the stories that Katie, Kim, Becky, and Amy shared with us, I see this as a very great and they share the story with us, right? I'm sure each one of them can share maybe 10 stories or more, but they chose to share that story. So I want to also concentrate on that positive outcome for the work that they do. And this is also, we need to say thank you. I know there are a lot of questions. I know the board needs to ask those questions and challenge you to become even much better. So I just want to make sure that those couple points that is shared with you. So thank you also for your work. And I will open it up again if anybody have more questions. So.
And one comment too, I talked to a parent this week that had I don't know the proper terms, intervention or whatever, one of the follow-up to this activity. Very positive conversation with the parent, the student, very positive conversation with the student. Yeah, so good work there, definite work. It's just unfortunate we don't have enough more money to get more CBAs and have more activities like that, but we all are faced with the budget and doing the best we can with that budget. So, but thank you for the continued work, and again, the consistency thing is the biggest thing that, always go back to. Just walking into each building should be the same in a lot of our opinions, and hopefully we're getting there with that eventually, but getting all the buildings to buy into doing the things the same way, it'd be a big improvement for all teachers, because I just think of teachers transitioning from building to building, you shouldn't have to relearn processes. Thank you.
And I agree with what you're saying there, Matt. The other thing is, when you're talking about clarity, I also had a conversation with a parent who had blasting out how wrong he thought whatever the teacher did for their child or not done and all of that. And after listening, then what I got through to him was that he wasn't having the clarity that he needed, and asked him to go back and then ask the questions differently, because at the time it had been emotional for him. So I think sometimes we need to take it into an account, you know, when we're having some of those initial conversations and stuff with the parents, that we talk about, yeah, we need that accountability. We know that. But we also know that, I should say, we don't know what's all going on in that family's life. And so continue to work with the clarity for that communication for the families too, please.
I'm going to add just a little bit more. So I know I've talked with several teachers from a few different buildings, and I appreciate that you've acknowledged that this is not working in every building. And I think we have to be able to say that out loud. I know that we've had conversations. I meet with Clint regularly to talk about some of these things. We come to these meetings and we have a lot of presentations, and I think it's important that everybody knows that while we can't gather as a board and make decisions and things like that, it doesn't mean that we leave this board table and we never talk about anything else. Like, we are reaching out, we're having conversations, trying to educate ourselves, right? Filling out feedback forms, all of these different things. And then along with parents and teachers, we're doing the daily desired experience surveys as well, and combing through those. I read, I think it's a total of like 45 pages of comments this week, right? We know that there's a theme, and so we are addressing it. It's just such a long-term plan that we have. So initially, when I'm looking at this and I see where do we need to act right now, in some of those buildings that there is a skills room, and they're the buildings that aren't doing well, right? But we're creating traumatic, or we're not creating them. Kids are experiencing traumatic events in their classrooms every single day, and we cannot ignore that. So that skills room needs to be staffed. That person that's staffing that is not a sub in the building that day then. I mean, unless we can guarantee that there is no behavior outburst that's going to require a student to be removed, then that teacher cannot be pulled or sub or para, or whatever the title is in that building, cannot be in a classroom subbing during the day. So the other thing too, on some of these flow charts, we did provide feedback with that. I don't know if you want to make those public, you can make mine public if you want, but just so that people can see the conversation that happens. But one of the things that I noticed on these, and I know these are not ours, these are just to reference, but I want to point out that I hope that ours doesn't account for almost 15 minutes of minors being disruptive in the classroom, which is what this one, when I look at those interventions, if we make it to 4 down here where we're doing student reflection, we're giving an additional 5 to 10 minutes. And I could be reading it wrong, but that's almost all of your class delivery. That's your core curriculum delivery, and learning didn't happen that day. So I think we need to take that into account when we're looking at some of these charts, and I think that happens on the daily in some of these classrooms. And again, we know where the struggles are, right? So we should be responding yesterday to those ones. On the majors and the serious and these examples that you have with us, especially ones that are coming with substance abuse or any kind of weapons, threats, anything like that, the SRO is missing as somebody on these lines. So if a student, credible or not, threatens anything in a building, the SRO should immediately be called. And honestly, I think too that if we can put into how many times that needs to happen, we have a case for some of those funding requests and things like that the next time we talk to the city, because I'm gonna guess from even my own children's experiences, we could be using them on a much higher case-by-case basis, right? So that would be the other thing. In talking with teachers, again, from all of these buildings, this is my final thought, I think. I will not make any promises. But everything that we're creating, I think that there are, again, probably those few buildings. They do not have buy-in to any of the things that we're doing, because it's another form that they might fill out, or they might send a kid out, or they might do all of these things, and there will be zero response. So if there's zero response, or if they're discouraged, or they're made to feel like they're inadequate in classroom management, they are not going to follow these procedures. And just like kids, we can share the expectations in every single morning meeting, but if they do not see the follow-through from the adults and the consequences, they will never follow those expectations. So we're gonna create the wheel, right? So when we know where the problem lies, we can continue all of this really great work, but we need to be doing something about the crisis now. So I hope that your team is in there and doing it, and I'll be honest, I have not heard that they are. I have heard that it happens at an administrative level, and then it does not come down into teachers except for instructional rounds. So they're not feeling heard and they're not feeling valued. So I just think that that's something that you guys should know. But I think that's it.
And I apologize if I came off as totally negative, but I am getting totally negative feedback from the community. And I mean, I have had very little positive feedback from, and I don't know if, because I'm the rookie, everybody's using my number, but I feel like it's just, I've been bombarded, and I certainly appreciate SEBAs and people that are putting in their time. I just agree that we have to do something, even if it's superficial for the moment. I don't know, we have to do something to get it under control now. And I'm not saying people aren't trying, and there's always positive stories, but I think our negative stories are outweighing our positive stories right now. Maybe we need to do a better job of getting the positives out there. My other question would be, is the district working on one of these for us then? Is that in the process of?
And I would just say in our conversation, I think in the last presentation, this is a long, complicated document, and really it's the administrative procedures that principals are leveraging to make sure that they're following up and consistent in their approach to things. So in what was presented was, what are ways that we can simplify that into a form that could be handed to a teacher or to a parent? And we spent some time talking about that. And again, at some point when you start to go through and what pieces, if it's a minor, that there are some teacher responsibilities in there, is it better to just give them this document, let them see that, and then through time we could maybe create something, but in the meantime, let's just get the document out there.
Well, that's what I'm wondering with administration. You said piloting this form. Is any of that being fed down to teachers, or is the administration, are they sharing that with any?
No, and Lindsay kind of alluded, you had this document for the last couple of years. We have, but this document now is different because before we didn't have level 1, level 2, level 3, and, I don't need to revisit how we've been waiting for the state, give us, that kind of thing. And so there's been things added and shifted and pieces of this document. So this 2-year document has morphed into something. What it is now is not what it looked like 2 years ago. Yeah, there are teachers that I know right now have access to this document. It's a draft because we're working through things. And so, but no, all administrators have it. Was that your question, Kim?
Yeah, but we've had minors and majors. We've had this similar things for many years. And I guess they just
yes.
They just keep
yes.
I don't feel like we ever really come to get something done point.
So
and I'm not saying it's easy. I was there.
And I think over time what's happened is elementary may have their version, the junior high may have a version of the high school. So we've been working on trying to get this one document everyone's going to use, everyone can agree to, and that's what we're going to use, and that's what we're going to share.
And uniformity and clarity are obviously important, and you're working towards that. So I just feel the frustration level building in some of the groups.
And again, even talking to administrators recently, it is very clear in what we're hearing in the DDE, and we look at our ESSA designations, it ties to special ed. All of this work ties together, right? Which is why it's important for us to be talking about it here at the board table as well. So this will continue to be ongoing conversation for all of us, because it is our work, and it is a priority for us.
If a child has behavior issues in school, and you reach out to the parent and you get no response, they won't get involved. For attendance, the county attorney sends out a letter. Is it possible to ask him to
So that's
Send out
and I
parent
think
or
it's
a nudge?
it's a good question, and it ties back, I think, Kim, to your comment about parent accountability. Ultimately, there is very clear legal code on attendance that can lead to consequences for parents. Sometimes, after all of the outreach we've done, when we start to get some communication with some of our families, it's when the county attorney becomes involved. It's not quite the same with behavior. And so it changes that a little bit. Certainly, if there's a behavior that's large enough and police are involved, that becomes a different situation. So that is a challenge in getting parents, and it's something we've talked about. We talk about it at community conversations. We'll talk about it as administrators. We talk about it in buildings. It's out in the community. There is a different component to, you know, some of our parent responses than it has been in the past, and that is a challenge.
This is a question that goes along with what Kim said about the fact that sometimes these teachers don't feel like they're getting that proper input back from. Is there almost like a checklist or something that says, okay, I did this, this person was supposed to do this, and then, oh, there's no checklist mark down on the teacher was back involved into, you know, what happened. That would be kind of like a clicker to say, hey, there's a lack of communication or something going there, you know, because a lot of times people assume rather than, you know, if you started the conversation, even if technically it's handed off because somebody else has to handle per se on it, if you started that conversation, it's always a good thing if they're made aware of how it turned out, what had to happen with that. And perhaps that's a little bit part of that disconnection in there for that clarity on the common sense for the teachers to be able to hear more on.
And I don't know that we'll have a checklist, but certainly this lays out the steps that should be taken. And when that's shared, you know, obviously our staff will know, here are the expected responses to that and whether that happened or not. I would be cautious in creating another checklist.
No, I
but
didn't
I
mean
do think it's built
necessarily,
in, it's built into this system.
Absolutely.
And one thing, I know it's a great discussion, and most probably it will be nice to continue that discussion in the future. But also, you know, we're human beings, right? And when it comes to issues like behavior, no matter what, you can create 1 million kind of lists and ask people to follow that as a map and or whatever. It's still the human factor going to play somehow a role here in the way we respond to situations like that. So it's what I'm trying to say, and I would like also us and Kim, you did mention that. I would like to also start sharing our success stories with the community, the positive side of what you are doing on a daily basis. Because let's say, if what I'm hearing here, if people are, for whatever reason, angry or upset, or they want us to do more and so on, perhaps maybe they are not getting the full story from us as a school district. So maybe we need to start communicating our success stories and what we do on a daily basis when it comes to behavior, when it comes to the academics, when it comes to every aspect of our district. We need to start maybe working more on communicating that message. Maybe, I don't want to say on a daily basis, but more often with the community and with people. And that's okay. Any other question? Great discussion. Thank you. Thank you to both of you, and thank you to your team. Thank you. Moving forward, we move into the next item, which is 2024-2025, a draft school calendar. Our HR, Jamie Kroger, please.
I don't have a fancy presentation. And I couldn't dress up and do an interpretive dance either. So I thought, well, you know, how do you make this interesting? So what we did this year, we did 4 different drafts of the calendar, and which was, I think, 1 or 2 more than we did last year. And we opened it up to our teachers union, MEA, to help and participate in that. So one of the drafts that was presented for public feedback was one that the teachers team put together. So I did want to share that not only did we take this from an administrative standpoint, but we looped in to get their feedback and invited them to enjoy in the ability to make a calendar. And if you've never done that, I would encourage you to never try that. It's super fun. So what we've shared in your packet are drafts A through D. There are very slight changes to each of them. So basically, what we put together, knowing that there are very few variables that we can do in terms of when we start and what that looks like in terms of when second semester begins. So there's not a lot of wiggle room. We tried to make slight adjustments that might be attractive to both our staff, our families, and our students. So essentially, there's no variation with the exception of B. The other 3 will start on the 23rd of August, and that is in Iowa code currently. You cannot start prior to August 23rd of any year. So some of the comments that we did get on the calendar was, would be nice to start earlier. We totally agree. So if you want to do a letter writing campaign, we would enjoy that too. But as it stands right now, we have to start no earlier than the 23rd. Option B, we did flip that to the 26th, which is a Monday. So that's the slight variation for the start day between the 4. All of them, with exception of B, and May 30th for our kids. And we've taken a lot of feedback that it's important to our families to really try to be done before the end of May, if at all possible. And it's just important for our outgoing staff who are retiring and looking at IPERS as well, because that has a direct impact on when they can start taking their disbursements. So we try to be cognizant of that. B being the other exception, since we did back that up to a start date of the 26th, the last student day would be June 2nd. So those are the only variations in the start and end times. Then with semester, 3 of them all end before winter break, which we have consistently heard, even from our student board members, that it's important to our high school students to be done before break. That gives families and students the ability to just kind of take that breath and enjoy their time away, knowing that we're kind of hindered on when we can start. So that window between how long first semester is to second semester is different. So option D was the option that put second semester beginning into January. So they would come back, then they would have their finals. I have to tell you, in the poll, D did not fare very well. We're looking at a solid 8.7% in favor of that one. So that one kind of crashed and burned, but we thought we'd throw it out there. The other variations are in how we do our PD days, where we put them, and then our conference weeks for fall and spring. So those don't have a great impact on the days or semester, but what they do have a great impact on is when teachers can get feedback to families and kids about how the students are doing, and when that is the best time to hold those weeks. So the consistencies among all 4 of them, they all have 172 student contact days. Now, if you look, you might question the conference comp days. By Iowa code, those 2 days do count as student contact days, and we do count them. So while no one's here, teachers are off, they count it because they've really essentially worked those hours throughout the course of those weeks. So we're able to count those. And then our teachers, in all 4 examples, have 190 contract days. And that's inclusive of the 6 holidays, the 12 teacher in-service days, and then the 170 teaching days, plus those 2 comp days. Another consistency among all 4 of them, we have 2 full weeks for our students to be off at winter break. We've also heard that, you know, this year was a little odd just because of how the holidays and the calendar fell. When it's a midweek, it doesn't feel like it's as much time, right? So I think we all felt that. We'd like to have that extra weekend attached to the end. So we've worked with the calendar to be able to provide that to our families and be able to recognize that it's kind of sacred time. So then, again, March spring break would be the 17th to the 21st on all calendars. And what we do that for one reason. It aligns with the Board of Regents calendars for Iowa State, Iowa, and UNI. And a lot of families are trying to provide time away for their whole family. And what we've learned is we've got families who have kids at a lot of stages. And so it's really important for consistency to try to mirror that. So that was the piece that put that spring break week in that week in March. The original, that went out for feedback in option C, we previously had the PD days, the 2-hour early dismissal on the 3rd and the 4th being the full day release. We've moved that back to the 10th and 11th, and that was due to there being only a very limited window of weeks that we could host homecoming. And so with the MAC schedules and with us being able to provide that full week experience for our kids in the district, we did go ahead and move that to how it's reflected in the copies you have for the 10th and the 11th, so that they can have homecoming one of the opposite weeks. I think it's the week before, don't quote me. So that was a slight change. And then just another piece to recognize is Easter is extremely late next year. I think it's the latest it can possibly be. So that's why you would see those days late in April that are off. And we heard feedback prior that, you know, families and staff would like to have both the Friday and the Monday. So to that extent, we've tried to work that into the calendar and take that feedback. Overwhelmingly, with over 50% response, draft C was our top choice. Coincidentally, that's the one that MEA put together. So kudos to them for really being cognizant of what the people in the buildings really like. Not to say that the other 3 weren't, but there's just always nuances that we don't have our finger on the pulse of. So that was a nice thing that we're able to provide, that they've gotten to have some feedback in that. The others were, A was the next closest at 29%, so we did have a pretty big gap between our number 1 and our number 2. And then again, B was at 11.9, and D was kind of a big dud at 8. So it is what it is, but we think we've put together the most cohesive sampling for folks to have the best input on. Really, those were the major differences. What I do want to mention is I know we'll do our public hearing as required by Iowa Code and bring forth a recommendation in February. Just so that it's on your radar, there is Senate File 2010 that is out currently, which makes a proposal to change the start date in Iowa to the first Tuesday immediately following the last day of State Fair. So what that means is we could do all this work and then we might have to change it. So just to kind of put that in the back of your mind, obviously it's just a bill right now in the Senate, but it does have UEN approval and support, so it could get some teeth in that. What that would look like, so I went ahead and looked at the calendar out through 2030 to kind of gauge like, where would we be looking at in terms of our first start date? For 2024, it would actually help us. So State Fair will end on the 18th of August. We could start on the 20th. And then 2025, we could start on the 19th. But then in 2026 is where it kind of gets hinky for a few years because the State Fair's late, because Labor Day's late. And so the first student day we could have in 2026 would be 8/25. And then that's the latest. So we might have fluctuation if this becomes a thing in our start dates, which is, it's always hard to explain to families why there's lack of consistency in some of that calendar building, but we would have to follow the letter of the law should that become, signed into law. So really, I learned a lot about State Fair planning today. So the State Fair, it ends the Sunday 2 weeks prior to Labor Day. So that Labor Day piece that is always moving is what predicts the State Fair dates, which would then predict our start date. So just so that you're aware, that's hanging out there, and we would always come back to, if that becomes a thing, after we've approved a calendar, obviously we would take a look at that and see what our impacts would be. Questions?
Jamie, I have a quick question because I know that more and more students from our school district are taking the academy with Muscatine Community College, and I don't have the Muscatine Community College calendar for the spring break in 2025. Is it going to be the same week or not? Because this is something also we need to consider, because otherwise the spring break becomes like 2 weeks instead of 1 week for students this way. So this is something just, and I don't have really the date handy with me. It's just like if we might just look into that.
Good point.
And try to match that with the MCC, especially as we are getting more and more students taking classes at the college.
Absolutely. And I know that Eastern Iowa has traditionally in the past aligned with the regions as well. I think that maybe in 2025 there might be some variance, but I'd have to look at that. I only know this because my own nephew was telling me that he can't go to spring break with us. So, important things when you're in college, right?
Yeah.
So yes, that's a great point, and we can definitely look at that.
JB, is there an extra teacher in service day this year?
So yes, where we shaved off the two, because we used to have 173 student days. We have so many hours built in, and since our district operates off of the 1080 hours component, we had flexibility to be able to pull back that one day and add it as an in-service day. And we did this twofold because we've realized that we needed to go back to an almost every month model, because going large stretches, you lose so much of what you've just shared with your teammates. And two, we do have curriculum rollouts that are continuing. So not only are we in the ELA, we want to continue providing that PD, and to be able to do that with fidelity, we need to be able to do that in a consistent manner. And then social studies, and to do that, we felt like we had the hours. How can we best use our time?
This is
On the in-service day too, it's built into the amount of contract for the teachers. But I've heard different teachers, without sometimes realizing who they're talking to, have indicated that they didn't bother going to an in-service day. Is there something of a requirement or something for them in which to do that?
So
or maybe one they
that's
don't want to do.
a $1 million question. And Joelle and I have had that exact conversation with MEA leadership, because they feel that too. Like when we have this dedicated time and half of your team doesn't show up, then that's a real burden on the other half that does show up. So we also want to be aware that, if you're going to take a day off, is it better to take a day off when kids are not present? Is it, so what does that look like? And so we're having that conversation with them on an ongoing basis. We can fully admit we have no answers no one has the answers, but we are engaged in that conversation all the time to see if there's something we can try. You know, is it adding more blackout dates for them being able to take PTO? Is it, you know, maybe some of these dates where we know we're not going to have dedicated speakers coming in and spending a lot of money on training, is that maybe a day where we could say, maybe that's a day that, you know, we could work with you on? You know, yeah, and so those are the conversations that we're having, and we're just really open to hearing the feedback from the staff too, because we realize that, you know, it's really hard to be gone when kids are in school. Like, it's a lot of work to be gone. It's a lot more work to be gone than it is just to be there on your deathbed, to be quite honest. And any teacher will probably tell you the same. Like, they will drag themselves in because it's hard to be gone. And so we want to acknowledge that, and we want to acknowledge the people who show up, but we also want to acknowledge that life is life, and sometimes you know, things just have to happen. So I think we're trying to make the best decisions we can and try them, and if they don't work, then we go back to the drawing board.
Jamie, a little bit of the feedback on the PD days. I think people really did appreciate all of the external speakers and things coming in, but it was too much, that it took almost too much time out of their building. And so I don't know if that would ever change an attendance thing. I would probably say maybe not black out the PTO days, but I do think just finding that balance, because outside speakers can really raise energy, but then also if they feel tied to it, they were missing a lot of time in their buildings where they needed to be working on that culture and stuff like that. And really, it just kind of feels like self-care. I think so.
And there's like that fine line, like how do you provide the dedicated time that they can devote to their practice?
Right.
And how do you devote that time that are things that we have really somewhat non-negotiables on? Like, we're rolling out a curriculum, we need to train you on it. So there's that give and take. So we're always trying to reevaluate at the end of the year, like what worked, you know, and listening to our constituents to see what they are feeling. Like, you know, two years ago when I got here, the feeling was they were asked, when do you want the bulk of your PD days? And they're like, we want them at the end of the year. And then the end of the year came and they're like, whoa, what do we do? And so we changed course. And so one of the interesting things is, you know, we were asked by MEA to do that in-service day coming back from winter break the last 2 years so they could just have time in their room.
Yes.
Decompress, get ready for the kiddos. And so if you see, that's on A, B, and D. It's not on the draft that they put together. So we're always willing to try things, and if they don't work, like they don't work, and we just try something new. So
How many people filled out the?
752. It was a huge response.
That's a lot, yeah.
And it was a really great reflection of parents and families, our staff at all levels, regardless of position. And then I think we still had about 12 high school students who filled it out. And I was like, yay, good for you. So I was pretty pleased that we had that type of response within a really short window. And we know that when we read the comments, we can't make all of them happen, but we were really trying to be purposeful in lumping them together to see, like, what can we do and how can we make that happen for everybody. So I don't mind any of them because I'm just here. Any other questions? Well, if you find you have questions later, you know where to find me.
Just one quick question. Do you think this will come as an action item?
It will be,
Next
yes.
month?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And again, trying to plan ahead on that, making sure we got some of this information to you. We've made some small adjustments here. I think, you know, again, the only piece is if that legislation passed, would we consider doing something differently there? Because some of the comments we heard is, well, couldn't we start earlier? And that, you know, moves your end date a little bit. So other than that, this is what you'll see for approval next month.
And I see Tony is ready for our next item, desired daily experience results.
Yes, thank you, guys. Tony Lokensol, Director of Communications and Community Engagement. So we've got the Fall 2023 MCSD DDE survey results for you. And for those at home that are maybe, for whatever reason, not familiar, the survey is given each October, the daily desired experience with students, families, and staff. And those are things that the district strives to deliver to each of those groups on a daily basis. The district team and staff and building will review the survey data to assess how things are going, make improvements when necessary, and will compare results from the previous year. So again, that you hope to see improvements from students, families, and staff with the DDE each year. So some of the DDE marketing for fall 2023, a couple examples are on that slide that were also included in your packet. I mean, obviously it's important to get the word out to all of our stakeholders, and what I'll say from my job, Parent Square has made it so much more efficient. That's our school-to-home communication tool. The fall 2023 DDE survey, we shared it out via there. We can contact over 7,000 people with one press of a button with Parent Square, which is nice. And social media account with the district reaches thousands of, just the Facebook page alone on the district, we'll see anywhere from 40 to 60,000 people a month. And we also had what was new this year with the rollout of the new district website, and the one screenshot on the right, the larger one, was a dedicated page on the website for the DDE with all the survey links. So the survey is available in English, Spanish, and French, which is based on feedback from families from previous years and community members. But what's nice about the district website, and I'm sure you've experienced this if you haven't, you can click one button from the district homepage and translate it to several different languages. All of the languages that are identified on the district website for translation are reflective of families in the district. So I think that's a nice piece. So Parent Square, again, easily able to send reminders, which was definitely something that we had to do more times than not this year, and that's reflective in the DDE survey numbers on our next slide. So if we start with MCSD students, you'll see for 2023 in the fall we had 822 completed, which is a little bit less than a year ago, but it's important to note that House File 496 requires students to receive permission from their parents to complete any survey at school. So that's where I come back to that Parent Square piece, is we continually pushed out reminders that said, because of the new law, we need you to complete this form. And again, as an end user, if you have the Parent Square app or on your computer, you could click that, sign it, and give that approval. But that certainly impacted the number of students that then completed the survey. And just a little bit more of a data point, we had over 2,400 families complete the form, which could have said either yes or no to their student completing the DDE survey. And the amount of no's was less than 50 in total when looking at it. But then from that 2,400, 822 students completed it. Go ahead.
I was just going to add, next year, knowing that change in legislation, we'll build that into the registration process, similar to the handbook piece. So before people can move on, they'll have to click through that and say, yes or no to that. So we'll build that in, and hopefully that should boost those numbers up next year.
And I certainly hear from people that feel like they get a lot of stuff on Parent Square, so I don't want to be that guy, right, that's sending them too much stuff. I mean, except for maybe winter days, like we've had a couple. But I do think it's important to get those reminders out there. And again, I go back to the ability to have the communication from the district via Parent Square be in their preferred language. I think that's a big deal that we don't have that barrier like we once did. So coming back to the data, families were up. So 400 families completed the DDE in fall of 23 when compared to fall of 22. And then a real significant increase, as you can see, in staff. So 500 staff completed the DDE in October of 23 compared to 341 in the fall. So that gives us a total of 1,722 completed surveys. So what worked when you talk about that staff number, allowing staff time to complete that survey, encouraging that they do so on some of those in-service work days, and the result was a significant number of total staff that completed it, as we just talked about. Parent Square, as I said, time and time again, making communication so much more efficient, the ability to reach 98.5% of all families, and not to go total deep dive on Parent Square, but we get reports every time we use it, and if there's 3 families that we have a non-working telephone number for, we know exactly who they are. We can contact the building secretary and then ask if they could get that updated. So that is very efficient. And the result from that, again, an increase in families who completed the DDE survey. Looking ahead to October 2024 and some DDE goals, allowing, as Clint said, for that parental consent to get captured during the registration process. I think that's crucial. And then it becomes one less thing that we have to constantly ask folks, right? Now, we'll send reminders in October of 24, but probably with less frequency because hopefully we'll have captured them during the registration process. And the goal is to have over 2,500 students complete the survey. As of putting this presentation together for this school year, there are 3,341 students enrolled in grades 3rd through 12th. That's who we target with students completing the survey. So again, if we can get closer and closer to hitting, obviously it'd be nice to hit 100%, but I would love to see us, exceeding the 22 numbers and get close to 2,500. Increase the total number of MCSD staff. So I would like to see that get to, again, 100%. Is 650 more realistic? We have over 800 staff members. I think continuing to encourage them to complete it and them understanding that their feedback is valuable. And I think some of the work that we'll talk about at the end of this presentation that'll be happening this week will lead to that. And then an increase to the total number of families to at least 1,000. So when you look at the results side by side on the screen in front of you and in your packet, and for those at home, you're going to see the results from 2022 and then 2023. Up first are the students' responses. And what's nice to see when looking at the 23 data versus 22 is increases, right? So if you just kind of go down the line, feel physically safe and emotionally safe at school, that's up from 22 and so on. And that's something that Clint and I were talking about today, just to see that trending in a good direction when compared to 22's data.
One of the things that we do for that vision scorecard that we share with the board is we kind of take all of those responses and kind of boil them into a number for staff, students, and parents. And it's just basically the percentage of responses that are positive against all the categories. And we've been tracking that over the last 3 years, and students has continued to go up. Now, that being said, when we drop about 50% of the responses from students, that's something we're going to have to monitor next year if we can, we want to get more students, but how will that impact, the results? Again, glad to see they're still, trending in a positive direction, but when you drop that many students, obviously you worry that, you've changed the kind of the sample size a little bit. That being said, our parent responses are up about 15% from the prior year in the total number of responses. And they're also, the average is more positive. And you can see that as you compare them individually by sections. And then our staff, so keep in mind the total number of responses for staff went up almost 50%. It went up 47%, which is fantastic. And that's a number we want to continue to try to grow. And we saw that average response go from 47 to 46. So down a little bit. As you look kind of category to category, you'll notice there's usually a small dip in each one. But again, feeling good that we had a significant higher response rate, and then still looking at that relatively flat year-to-year change.
So then if we continue the process for feedback, so the DDE survey data will be shared with all MCSD staff members this Thursday during the in-service with the 2-hour early dismissal. That's January 25th. All buildings, departments will select staff members using a staff voting process to serve on the District Environment Committee. That comes directly from looking at some of the comments from staff on the DDE survey, which you all have access to as a theme, as we would like to say, that identified that several staff had referenced bringing that back, so that'll come back. Feedback forms, will be used at each site for student, parent, and staff input. The District Environment Committee will then meet on February 8th from 4 until 5 to share building and department input, so taking immediate action. Again, if you follow the comments from the DDE, building that DEC committee, you know what we need more of is acronyms in education, right? Holy moly. So forming the DEC and then the DEC having that meeting on February 8th. We're looking forward to that process. And then building and district goals will be developed and shared with all stakeholders, and the DEC will continue to meet quarterly to review the progress of those goals with the next meeting following in May.
So just to, and we'll talk about some of the comments, and we've already, referenced some of them in our previous discussion, but Wednesday morning, each building staff will receive their building results, right, ahead of the meeting on Thursday. At that time, we'll also take the raw comments that you received and attach it to this agenda. So there'll be public district responses. We're going to wait until the buildings have had a chance to access we'll be at the same time. We spent time last week as an administrative team going through the process of what you're going to present, how that presentation is going to go, the types of things they're expected to do there with all staff. Again, going back to consistency and clarity so that everyone's experiencing it in the same way. One of the expectations from me is that when they share the results, they share them with their entire staff, not just teachers, right? We've included everyone in that, and they need to be invited to the table to have that conversation so that we know as they go through and they look at their responses, as they look at their data, and they look at how staff has responded, how students have responded, they're going to go through a process that, hey, what are some successes and what are some areas of growth? And are they areas for the building level or district level? So then as they look at the building pieces, they'll be developing action plans based on that building feedback. That again, all of them will be a part of that conversation. Then we'll have 2 representatives from each building, a teacher as well as a non-certified staff as well. And obviously we adjust that. High school has obviously a lot more staff, so they'll have a few more members on that. All of those will come here to the district office on the 8th. They'll share out some of the things that were talked about at their building, and also we'll start talking about what are some of those common themes across the district, and then how do we start building out that plan. So that District Environment Committee will be meeting quarterly. So we have that first date in February scheduled. The next time we meet with them will be in May. That gives us a little time in between to do some things, but also come back to the board and share. We had a district meeting. Here are the things we talked about. Here's some of the things that we're putting together for that improvement process. So again, it's really important that we're as clear and transparent in this process as possible. People have made comments, and now probably the most important piece in this is that we spend time looking at this and saying, now what do we do with it? How do we get better? And building plans at a building level and a district level to do that. So that questions, but also, again, some common themes that you saw as you looked at the responses.
And I'm just going to add something really quick, Lindsay, to your point. I read through all 645 comments in total, and it's nice to be able to see things and know that you can take sometimes immediate action, right? A couple of reoccurring comments were just the DDE poster itself and how it's oriented. Could it be bigger? Could the text be bigger? So I already have my graphic designer, Jessica is her name, working on a proof of that. So it's nice to be able to, again, see that and not dismiss it, right? Be able to look at it and go, okay, this is here more than once. And let's get a proof together and see for the next round, because we'll need more posters, right? Can we change the orientation, make it easier to read? We certainly see it. I see it all the time when I'm in all of our buildings. So I appreciate that feedback from folks. So
I think, Tony, to that point too, in changing the survey, there are questions on, or not the survey, but the advertisement, poster, my words. But each year there have been comments onto like, I would have answered this differently if value, respected, and safe were different. I think it's important though that that it stays the same, right? Because we're collecting data, so not to discourage that, but I think if your question is different, put it in the comments like we are, because if we change it or we add drop downs and all of that stuff, then we can't look at that growth or how it's changing each year. And we don't want to start over, but just encouraging people to keep putting those things into the comments would be the one thing. So next, will the District Environment Committee meet over the summer then as well to keep the quarterly?
I think the plan is we would meet twice, kind of first semester, twice second semester.
Okay. And then is it possible for us with the responses too? I know we were a little late in the family part and breaking it down into schools, but can we get the results broken down by schools?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, as you started talking, I was like, I wonder if she's going to bring that up. So that is certainly something, to your point about looking at ways to improve the actual survey, is figuring out a way so that our families who have students in multiple buildings, which happens quite often, can identify clearly this is responses for McKinley versus the high school or Jefferson or whatever. So currently that does not exist. So the data is quantified as more of just overarching comments. The comments that you would have received would be from all families, but we're unable to, because so few selected a building. So I think the other part of that would be in the communication, making it extra clear when you're completing this, and however we adjust that question, either, drop down and select 2 buildings, or, complete one survey. I don't want people to have to do it twice, but whatever we have to do to drill into that more is definitely something that we've had conversations about.
And Lindsay, to your point, I think it's something we've talked about every year, is just the structure of that survey. And we certainly could break each one of those into multiple pieces and have a response for each one of those, but then what happens is that survey becomes extremely long, and then people don't want to fill it out because it takes too long. So, but I think one of the things I'm certain all of you saw, is that when people want to go into detail about a response, they do. Yeah. There's no limit on what they can write there. So, some of them are short, but some of them are very long and detailed, right? So they have the opportunity to go into some of those details, because they have that open response at the end.
And then I have one more question on your presentation. I'm sure there's a reason. The district, or like the responses to, well, I think one of these are just words flipped, but the number of responses don't match the number of surveys received on your...
Yeah, so are you referring, I can answer that. So are you referring to like this slide when it says district had 498 and not 500?
Yes.
So when we took this snapshot, the survey was still open, and then and I had asked, David Svensson is our data guru, and I brought that to him, and he said he could do it, but it would complicate things, and he would basically have to rerun it. So that's where you're seeing a little discrepancy in some of those numbers.
It's
but yeah,
close enough.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if
No,
those
I'm
were,
not
like,
fudging the numbers.
unfinished,
Yeah,
or...
no way, absolutely. No, I appreciate that, and that's something that, having the struggle of the constant reminders for the survey, we did keep it open longer than I would have liked, but I do think, towards the end, with especially some reminders to staff, we did see those numbers shoot up in that last week. But that's why that snapshot is a little lower. Yeah.
Will the, I don't know, it used to be DAC, now it's DEC, but will that have parent representation, community, school board? Will there be members on that committee?
For the district environment?
So right now, it's just staff members from across the district for each building, because they're building their building plan, right? And the district plan, again, with the idea that we're bringing those things to you and sharing them with you. And certainly, I would want buildings to share, what they've identified with their families as well.
I just know in the past there's been some parent representation
And we have,
community and
we have SIAC.
SIAC.
So, and that has parents on it, and we always are sharing information with them and community members. Certainly there's plenty of opportunities to share the conversation with people.
School Improvement Advisory Committee, for those playing the acronym game at home. Sorry, there's so many.
And I believe we have a meeting coming up soon, next month or the month after. But what we did last year is we shared those survey results with that group, and we talked about, kind of where we were headed with that.
And I sit on that committee for anybody that's wanting to know at the board level.
Any other question for Tony? Thank you, Tony.
Well, do you want us to talk about
And
the
certainly, yeah, it
comments?
was prepared, like
Okay.
I,
Sorry, I didn't know if
we've,
that was in there.
as an admin team, we've talked about some of the themes. We've talked about some of the themes already tonight. I think, as Tony said, there are items in there that, remember when we were taking this in the fall, obviously there were certain things happening. There was a lot of implementation with literacy, so we're hearing some of those comments. Some of the things have already been addressed, not all of them, but again, some things have happened since then that, have addressed them. And we also know, and again, it's why it's important to have that conversation, there's polar views on things. Like, I think there's not enough communication. I think there's too much communication. Okay, so how do we have that conversation? What's the right balance, right? But yes, wanted to have an opportunity for you to at least, even though I think we've talked about it a little bit, to talk about themes and comments that stood out to you.
We have an overwhelming amount of comments on behaviors, right? I think it's fair to mention too that this is a very open question and it's phrased as like, what can we do better or what concerns, right? So it's very much the feel of the survey that most of these are going to be negative experiences. We do have some in there that are positive, like, thank you, my student loves it. But we've talked a lot about the behavior, so I won't rehash any of that tonight. But I think communication stood out a lot to me. And I know that that's even been one of my own questions, is communication has changed drastically internally in buildings from when I had a younger one, and now that he's older, what it looks like, and parent engagement. And I think we're rebuilding a lot, but really like that has to kind of just stop being the excuse to. But so somebody can verify, was there fast testing last week? Did we test? Yeah. Guess how many teachers told me about that? So as a parent, I remember the days that it came out that it was, hey, be an active partner. Your kid is testing this week. Let's have a healthy breakfast. Like, that's something so small, right, that parents really do know. But all of our kids went through that, and it is stressful. Like, we all know when we're assessed on anything, you are feeling anxiety at levels as adults that we get to understand and talk about. But when we don't know to support our own kids, I mean, I'm just giving a personal example, right, that was communication that I did not receive, that I could have really been a champion or a partner in my kids' education there. And then I would even know to follow up maybe and find out how I can help in other ways, get them to school on time. Another, if my kid's gonna be out of the building, I also wanna know that. I've shown up to drop them off after a doctor's appointment, and there's a bus out there, and I'm like, what? Oh, they're all leaving today. I'm like, what? I had no idea. I mean, so I think that there are just these small opportunities that we used to do really well in making parents partners. We're not doing that anymore. And so I think that's an experience across the district, and it felt a little good. So I'm glad that we see these comments as a whole too, because it's nice to know where we're not alone, and then we can have a common theme that, like, this is all we're asking for, right? Just tell us what we're working on, that there's a test this week, or whatever it might be. But that would be one of my main comments for now, and I know it'll break down and we'll have a lot of things. But then again, behaviors, and when I look at these staff comments, like, this is gonna sound a little dramatic, but I'm like, if they all walk out, what happens? Right? So who volunteers to help? And I get that this is a small percentage of comments when you look at the whole, and if we look at it on a percentage level of who actually said something, we're gonna be like, it's not that big of a problem. I think we need to look at this as one comment is a big problem. That's our goal here, right? So instead of trying to scale it down and make it feel a little less heavy, I think we should feel it is pretty heavy. So I think that's
Yeah, and I would say, and I won't speak for Clint, but in our administrative team meeting last week, I mean, he stressed just that, right? Like digging into it and not, and dealing with the stuff that is heavy. And I would say that in the 3.5 years that I've been here, I've shown up in a in a survey comment, and Clint's shown up, and it can be tough to read that. But I would stress that for those watching, I think it's important that I would say the majority of us in this room have read through almost, like I said, I've read through all 645 comments. I know Clint's dug into all of them, and the board's working through that, and that should be noted for the people that took time to complete it, right? That it's not just going into the nethers, right? We're seeing it, and there's people that are gonna put eyeballs on it and want to implement change. Because, you know, we would never say that we're perfect, so I appreciate those comments, the long, short ones, and the tough and not tough ones, for sure.
And then am I hogging the mic today? I really am. So the last comment too, like these were done in October, so I think a lot of things have changed maybe, and hopefully, I don't know, maybe these comments aren't true anymore. But it does feel like it was a while ago. And as I was reading through some of them, I could even like pinpoint some of the moments that they maybe were talking about, right? And so I think that that's important to notice, but also we've talked as a team, and I've had conversations, I know too, about how does administration and at a building level and at a district level really let everyone know that they're hearing this, they're listening to it, and that they're part of those ongoing conversations in the meetings here. So I think we know what the themes are, and I won't like out anyone or talk about the details of it, but I do hope that if somebody had filled this out and you're wondering if they're listening, if in the next couple of weeks you don't feel like your voice has been heard, I would like to know that. Or if your comments have changed and you think that we need to look at it a little bit differently, I would encourage people to keep reaching out, because otherwise this just stays in time and then we talk about it as it was written. So maybe follow up with us and let us know how it's going.
I think we're always going to have that kind of in the moment comments, and that may change from year to year. And certainly we're going to see themes over years, right? And I pointed out to our administrative team, there was a comment in there that said, well, last year you shared all these results in front of everybody, and I can't believe you did that. And I said, yeah, and I totally understand that comment, but we're going to be transparent. And it's important to put them out there. If people wrote these down, then let's talk about those. And we talk about, and even if it's one comment, well, certainly we're going to look for themes, but even if it's one comment, it may have value, right? So we have to take each one of them seriously and have the conversation, again, at a building level and a district level.
And I think along the communication thing, not only between parents and the district, but within the district, like you say, it's a fine line. Some people get too many emails and they don't read any of them, and yada, yada. But I think, I don't know, I think maybe about COVID time, we kind of stopped with staff notes. It would be nice if administrators just by Friday sent out a staff note with important things going to happen the next week. I don't know. Some buildings may still do that, but I know some buildings have dropped that. If that could maybe be, I don't know if that could be more consistent.
And again, I think that would be important, Kim, for the building to talk about, like, hey, we're not feeling that we're getting enough communication. Okay, how can we do that? Well, you know, we used to do this, and let them, you know, develop that.
Right.
Joelle was saying, and Becky, that it is happening. Yeah? Okay. Or a week where it doesn't happen, but yeah. And again, I would say the other nice thing about, not to bring up the Parent Square thing again, but for those staff that maybe are feeling overwhelmed, they really have control of, if you want, calls, texts, emails, app notifications, so that you're not getting a barrage of stuff from us.
And I think that communication is a great theme because it's very layered across multiple responses, from district communication, internal staff communication. It's teacher-parent communication. There's some student comments in there around communication. So, like, there's a lot of layers to that it just takes time to work through that and really dig in to see how do we get better.
Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Moving forward with facility updates with Chris Niehaus, please.
Okay. So we haven't done a project update here lately, so Clint and I will just I'll give you a brief rundown of where we're at with all the current projects and kind of where we're going, and answer any questions if you have any. So the good news is this: our production kitchen is very, very, very close to being turned over to us. We have 2 inspections on Wednesday, the fire inspection and the final building inspection. As long as those go well, we'll get occupancy of the building. Now, we do have a little bit of we're working through redoing the flooring, because the flooring didn't turn out as well as we probably would have liked. It's scratching easily, and it's kind of a real dark gray right now. So you're seeing a lot of dirt and things like that show up. So that's going to take a little bit of time to get that refinished again, but they can kind of do it in stages. So we'll be able to begin using it as long as the inspections pass. So that's good.
What kind of flooring's in there?
It's like an epoxy, Sherwin-Williams, yeah. So, there were some challenges with the contract. The contractor actually quit. That was supposed to got the flooring there. It was subbed out like 2 days before he was supposed to start on it. And so then that kind of threw things into a little bit of a chain of events that didn't work as well as we wanted it to, but. Secure entrances are going well. So Grant and Susan Clark are almost finished on the interior. We have some temporary occupancies at both of those places. Madison's just a little bit behind, but we're hoping that all three of them, interior and occupancy, will be ready by the end of the month. We'll still have a little bit of exterior work to do just because of weather and some contractor issues that we haven't got to yet with those. So it won't be completely finished, but we'll be able to use those spaces. So everybody's excited to be able to use those. They're really, really nice spaces. So if you haven't seen them yet and you want to, just let us know and we'll run you through there. But they're a great improvement to all three of those buildings. Okay, baseball, softball, these outdoor ones, is all dependent on weather. So we're kind of slowed down a little bit, I would say. Softball is still building dugouts right now. I mean, they haven't for the last week and a half just because of all the snow, but they do have a covered area where they're going to continue to try to build the dugouts and get those things erected. And same thing with the concession when they get to that. Baseball is kind of at a standstill until we get the bleachers in, which is mid-February, so they'll probably bleacher building will begin like in March, early March for baseball and softball for that matter. So they're probably a little bit behind, but Russell has indicated that they don't think it's going to be anything that is going to not allow us to use them at the start of practices yet. Now, again, these are all weather-dependent things here, so if we can turn the weather around here and get a mild spring, I don't think we'll have any issues. But if it's wet and cold for longer, that might throw some wrenches into that. But for now, they said they're going to get them done. Okay, Jefferson, same thing. Probably slowed down a little bit just because of weather. We had, you guys know, a number of challenges there. That we had to deal with just because of the proximity to Central and some things that happened there. But that obviously pushed the timeline back on Jefferson to what now we think is about mid-November. Again, all weather dependent too. So, I would say hopefully we'll have it, at that point. But that's where we're at for that. Okay, Central. So I will say we had a great turnout for the open houses. We did two one night a couple weeks ago, just allow people to come in, identify things that they want to purchase, but I would say half the people that came in just wanted to come and walk through the building. So, and we did our second event last Saturday, and I'm guessing we had 300-400 people that walked through, and they were really appreciative just to be able to go through there and just reminisce. So it was a pretty neat. There were some pretty cool stories and things happened. So it was a good event. So the bids for the tear down of Central we're going to bring to the February 12th meeting. So those bids are out. We walked contractors through the area last Friday, and we had about 50 contractors in the building. So that's good. That's usually a good sign. So we'll be getting those back, and then we'll bring those to to the board on the 12th for approval. And the last thing is the Susan Clark Athletic Complex. All of the drawings are done for that, so that will, the bids will go out in a couple weeks for that, and we'll have, the plan is to have those brought back to the board by the March 18th meeting to get moving on that one. Questions? Okay.
Auction. I looked a little bit at the information online, so thank you for having a bunch of the stuff on there. But I noticed some, needless to say, either 0 bids, $1, $10, not necessarily a lot of bids. Are we looking to do some extension time due to the fact that also, you know, you got the bids for February, but they're not going to be able to start doing anything for a while? So is there like an extension time or anything, so to make sure we get enough of people do the bidding? Because I would hate to see a lot of the stuff can be recycled in some kind of a way rather than just being totally destroyed. Is there another alternative if somebody does not take in a bid to get things?
Yeah, I think the challenge that we have is that we got to get it bidded out, or, you know, people will go buy whatever they want to buy, but then there's going to be a few weeks that we have to meet with them to go into the building to get out whatever they're getting out. Some things are easy, some things aren't so easy. So, you know, we were just looking at, I think that we wanted that done by February, just where they actually went into the building, got all their things by February 9th or something, I think was the date that we had set for that. But what's going to happen after we approve the bids, we're going to move really quickly. So as soon as we get permits, basically they're going to shut the building off. So that's going to be a week or two where we'll start having contractors in the building to, you know, because rerouting all the mechanical, electrical, and those things has to take place before they can tear down the actual classroom portion. So there's going to be a lot of that work that's going to get moving really quickly.
I understand that, which means it would have been nice if they would have started the process of having people come in and getting the bids done, so we're not at that spot. Because, again, I guess because I'm a recycling type of person and stuff, it just feels bad that if we've got a lot of stuff in there that we're just going to take to a landfill or whatever, what happens with all of that stuff. If there is some other type of alternative that is thought about how we can take, you know, certain things or areas in there, you know, because there's lots of wood, doors, you know, different things, and maybe even some of the classroom stuff that if there's a bid on, are you just going to take and have that stuff destroyed, or is that stuff going to be taken out of and then donated somewhere or whatever?
I think we would be open to getting rid of anything that people would want. I mean, we've always, you know, tried to communicate that. So you know, the other thing is that there's a lot of things that have been in there for many years. And so, you know, some of this work probably could have happened, you know, long before us standing here right now talking about tearing the building down.
I talked about this last year about getting that process started, so that's why I'm a little frustrated. So then now we're here and all of a sudden, boom, and they're going to get out and do that. So I would encourage that general public, if there's anything more that they want or have, you know, through their churches, whatever, and some of those tables and, you know, chairs and different things, you know, to make some kind of suggestion on how they could get those items.
So Chris, I have a
Would it be
question.
possible?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Denny.
Okay. So, you talked about, the building at the baseball, softball doing possible, the coverage of the dugouts. What about the concession stand? Is that the same process?
Yeah, I think they're working on one dugout at a time, and then so they'll get one done, go to the other dugout, and then do the concession stand last.
Okay, all right. And just that I've had a lot of comments from people about the central people going through there, and a lot of positive comments. So I just want to appreciate, thank you and your staff for allowing that to happen. I know we had great participation in those 2 days, and again, thanks for giving the community that opportunity.
The parents' comments, would it be possible to have a 1 day open to the public, first come, first serve, take whatever you want, type of thing?
Yeah, we could probably make that happen, I suppose.
Yeah, there's certainly, you know, again, still trying to work within that time frame. And Karen, to your point, one of the things that kind of slowed this process down was the abatement. So the asbestos abatement of the building. So that had been done several years ago. But really, when you start to get into the fine, you know, all the little details within, with a tear down, there's a little more complexity to it. And so we had to have that reviewed, and they found additional areas that had to be abated. So that kind of pushed, we had to have the building shut down for a period of time while they did some of that. So we couldn't have had some of the earlier, you know, we planned on doing some of that community, bringing them in earlier, and had to push that back because of some of that abatement. So, but yeah, we can certainly look at some other opportunities for people to grab some things.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
No one wanted the 212 door on here?
Oh, it'll go.
I feel like that could be wheeled out on the cake action floor on Friday.
Yes.
The 212 door, were you a Central kid?
No.
Oh.
But
I
there
mean,
was many comments about 212.
Right.
I mean, that's what
So
was the most popular item.
someone wants to like fire escape plan. What was that?
I-
Someone's paying $10 for that. So if you wheel that door out, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I did see somebody say they wanted that door, so.
Yeah.
Any other question for Chris? Thank you, Chris, for the updates. And moving forward, we move into our superintendent, Clint Christophers, for some updates about the boundaries.
So I'm just going to do a quick update, and there was a reason I had Chris go first. So as you know, originally we were planning on Jefferson opening that addition at the start of the school year. As, again, they started getting into the ground around Central and behind Jefferson, where the old Jefferson was. Lots of surprises there that have pushed some things off. So then it was October, they were thinking, it was November. And so in terms of switching boundaries to adjust for that, it's not good to move kids middle of the year. So that's put a hold on some of that. We know, we've had conversation with dual language at Franklin, and we've had some conversation with staff there. We will be looking to move that program to Jefferson. It just won't be next year. Talking to Mr. Spees at Franklin, he has capacity to have one more year of dual language in the building and still maintain his other sections. So we'll be okay there, knowing that the following year, then we'll have kindergarten, first, second grade transitioning to Jefferson. So we'll continue to do more communication with that, fine-tune the other maneuvers around that, but right now we don't have capacity to put other kids at the start of next year, so we're just kind of putting that on hold. Again, talking with all of our elementary principals, because there's little pieces of this that kind of impact all of them. Madison we can remove those portable trailers over the summer, and they have a couple of empty classroom spaces now, just gearing up and being prepared for that, that they'll be able to leverage next year and get through that year, and then we'll adjust that boundary and move those kids and fill Jefferson, and Madison will be good to go. So given that, we'll still continue working on boundaries, but just wanted to get that update out there that due to some of the construction pieces, that certainly put a kind of a hold on that process.
Who's a part of that boundary update?
Right now, we've started with just, from an administrator standpoint, identifying what groups of kids we could move. And then once those become formalized, then we communicate to staff, then we'd set up meetings with parents. Ultimately, then it would come to you as a board to approve.
Any other question? Okay, thank you, Clint. Moving forward to discussion and information section of our agenda.
John, can I just, one more comment on that? Matt, your comment reminded me of that. It is important to remember when we talk about the boundary changes, they're very localized to what's happening at Jefferson and Madison, right? There's been some rumors about, oh, you're going to do this and you're going to change that. We're not starting from scratch, changing all, like, we're talking about an impact of 100 kids or less of all of our elementary students. So it is a very targeted change to adjust to what we have and what's coming up for these projects. So again, I just want to take a moment to get that out there as well, that it's not everyone's going to be affected by this. So.
And that our open enrollment policy is not being affected at this time either.
Correct. Now, next year, given some of our capacity issues based on this, not being able, you know, there may be some situations where, hey, if you wanted to get into Madison, you can't because they're full, right? And vice versa in some of those other spaces.
Thank you. So we move into discussion and information, announcement of upcoming meeting and events. January 25th, 2-hour early dismissal. January 26th, in-service, no school. January 26th, Muskie Booster Cake Auction at the MHS. And February 6th, MCSD and Riverbend Food Pantry here at the district office. And February 12th, the community conversation here also at the community, at the district office. And remember, it's 5:30. It starts at 5:30. And February 12th, regular meeting for the board at the admin center also at 6:15. Any other announcement?
I do, just from the standpoint that I think it's an important from February 2nd at the game that night. That is also what they call Hall of Fame time. So the inductees will be a part of that time frame. And I think that is just, it's cool that we have a bunch of different former MHS personnel, students, and others that are a part of that.
Thank you, Karen. Anybody else?
I did have people ask if we could have the kids go to school Friday, so because they're getting so out of routine. I doubt it, but I'll bring it up.
That's for Clint.
Right now, we have used 4 days and 2 hours of that time. Again, just a little more than 5 built into that. And we'll see how we fare from here.
Thank you. Okay, so moving forward, we need to have a motion to move into a closed session to discuss the purchase of particular real estate per Iowa Code 21.51J. What are the wishes of the board?
I will make the motion to move into a closed session.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call to go into a closed session?
Sure. Director Connard.
Aye.
Director Cooney.
Aye.
Director DeBeat.
Aye.
Director LaRue.
Aye.
Director Phillips.
Aye.
Director Schneider. And Director Shore.
Aye.
All ayes.
Thank you. So let's take a couple minutes to
And I
adjust.
would just say, if we can be as efficient as possible. I do know the roads are getting a little sketchy with some freezing rains. I want to keep that in mind for all of you. So the sooner we can get that started, the better. But certainly take a few minutes if you need to use the restroom.